Today's episode is brought to you by cattle. Every product launch faces a chicken and egg problem. You need reviews to convert, but you need conversions to get reviews. Cattle can help.
Cattle helps brands win share. They leverage their consumer panel for insights, collecting receipts, and driving product ratings and reviews. It is the largest daily active survey panel in Canada, with over 10,000 daily active users and over 100,000 monthly active users. Let cattle be your chicken and or your egg, depending on your perspective. Visit getcattle.com to learn more.
Focused on the consumer and what they're actually looking for, and not in a way of like, oh, how do we sell to them? It's no, how do we make it so that they have a better opportunity to make a decision of how something may or may not fit into their life.
Welcome to Hearts and Carts, the CPG podcast, the podcast about the people behind the products that are winning hearts and filling carts. This cast is for anyone with an interest in the world of consumer products. We're your hosts, Justin Osborne and Alex Hill, and our mission is to bring you weekly content that helps you be a better and more informed CPG professional.
Welcome back to another episode of Hearts and Carts. Today, we're really excited to bring to you one of our friends from back in the day at SC Johnson that's had just an incredible career in a really new and exciting industry. Alex, who do we got today?
Today, we're going to be chatting with the one and only David Côté. David is the founder and CEO at Northern Helm and the Chief Operating Officer at J Supply Co. He's an advisor and an active thought leader in the cannabis space and has done a lot there. He's worked for some of the major cannabis companies, and he's also had some pretty incredible other experiences along the way with companies including Tim Hortons and SC Johnson. So really excited to share David's journey with you and learn from him. You know, if you haven't already, please give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Those go a long way, and we really appreciate them. As well, follow us on our various social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. And with nothing else to add, let's talk to David.
Those northern lights got nothing on you. That look in your eyes, shining brighter than the man up in that moon. Could be looking up there, but they just...
Dave, how are you?
Gentlemen, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Been a minute, man.
It has been a while. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Yeah,
Where
it's
are you
been
at?
forever.
Yeah, where are you located these days?
I'm in Toronto.
In Toronto? In the big smoke, eh?
Yeah, not as fun as you guys being out on the mountain and in Victoria, right?
Yeah, I'm out on the island now. Yeah, moved out to Vancouver 5 years ago, I guess, a little bit over 5 years, and then out to the island a little bit ago. So made the move from Vancouver to the island. So,
Where on the island?
a town called Souk. So it's like west side of the island, about 45 minutes to an hour from Victoria. So if you kind of follow the coast up, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, not a bad spot.
My wife's grandmother is in Qualicum Beach.
Oh, okay, yeah. See, up the other side, also a really nice spot.
Yeah,
Can't afford to be on the water in Qualicum or something like that. But that's we've taken Leo, my son, there a few times. The beach is amazing and like crazy nice parks, and that's a really nice spot. But
Yeah,
I think also an older dynamic, like in terms of people. I think.
Yeah.
But
Like,
that'll be where
a long time.
I'll be there in 30 years probably. I'll say that's what I'll end up going with. And Alex and I were just talking about it's been so long. We haven't chatted with you in a long time. We're looking back at your LinkedIn and going, oh my gosh, it's been like 9 years since I've talked to this guy. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's been too long, and it's crazy to think how quickly that time has gone by. It's funny, like looking at the questions that you send. It's like, what advice do you have? Like, recognize that it moves quickly from your 20s or your 30s, like really fast.
Yeah.
Speaking of our mini agenda, we forwarded on. I noticed Justin wrote, "How much do you miss Justin?"
Yeah, I didn't know
on
that.
there, as though I don't exist. I thought that was,
to be fair,
very
I've listened to a
presumptuous.
lot of these, and Alex, if you're not asking that question, that's how Justin lines it up anyway. So
for sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I figured everyone misses Alex, so I really need somebody to pump my
I'm
tires. So
pretty
that's why the
sure
question.
Alex is like you're carrying it right now, right? In terms of the battle between the two of you, of who misses who
He's
I don't
misses.
know
carrying.
if I don't
Yeah,
know if the analytics on the podcast go that deep, but if they did, it might be slightly tilted in my favor. I'm not sure.
yeah,
There you go. That's the value that I can provide here is just checking that analytics. You guys worry about the really important stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he carries it in every other way, so I think he gets that as well.
Uh,
It
Man,
seems like you both are doing really well, though, right? Like Alex, you just keep moving up in SCJ, getting more and more
yep.
responsibility, and Justin, you're taking on the world beyond meat.
yeah, it's yeah, I'm in the plant-based space. Well, I'm in plants just like you, but just a different area of plants. But yeah, it's been
Different
fun
day
getting
part.
into the food side, and it's yeah, just kind of a new experience, and loved SCJ, but loved to move out west and trying something new, and it's good for the family, good professionally, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
That's great. Pumped for both of you. This is
Yeah.
good. And I said that when we initially started, like the fact that you pulled this together is just so awesome.
Thanks,
Because
man.
well, first, both of you are fantastic on a personal level, like in having one-on-one conversations with people. But then clearly keeping that network going. That's such a skill set that
Yeah.
frankly, I recognize in you guys when we were working together, let alone now, you've created this platform that is bringing so many awesome people that you've both interacted with over the years. It's pretty neat. And thank you for having me as a part of it. I don't know that I'm deserving of it, but I'm pumped to be here.
Appreciate that, man. I appreciate you joining us. Excited to chat and catch up and hear everything that's new and yeah, share a little bit of David Côté with the world as well. So it's going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate the kind words up front for sure. We'll take them anytime we can get them, of course. So let's just kick it off here and sort of introduce you to anyone listening. We have David Côté with us, who is the founder and CEO at Northern Helm and the chief operating officer at J Supply Co. He's also an industry advisor in the cannabis space, and he is someone that you may have noticed just by listening to us that Alex and I both had the opportunity to work with at SC Johnson. So early in our careers now, we were just talking about how old we all are. We all work together and we've all sort of gone on completely different paths, which is sort of cool now to look back 10 years and say, look at what David's done and talk through his different career paths. So I'm excited to have you on the show. And of course, I'm thankful for your support. Sounds like you're listening, so I appreciate that.
Of course, yeah.
And so maybe we'll just kick it off with you talking about, young David, right? When you were first getting into the work world and graduating, like what brought you to CPG in the first place?
Yeah, it's funny thinking about that in the context of this, hoping to come out with some nugget as to why. And looking back at it, really the school that I went to is you kind of went down three paths. It was investment banking, consulting, or marketing. And those were just the buckets that career management put you into. And if it wasn't one of those three things, you were in other. And I don't know that I fit well in any of those things. And I was talking to a friend of my grandfather's actually, and his comment was, if you can sell, you're always going to have food on the table. And that was like a really eloquent line, but there was a lot more to it, obviously. The point being, if you can get into some kind of situation where you're learning from people that are smarter than you on how to sell, and you're learning on building those relationships and recognizing that those pieces are all part of that puzzle of understanding what your customer wants. If you can learn that early on, that's going to have a major impact on your career. And I probably didn't learn that quickly enough, but at least I heeded the advice and started looking for account management and sales roles. That was really the goal after that, and on the CPG side. So with SC Johnson, had obviously phenomenal reputation, the opportunity to get in there. Mike Catalano, in talking to him early days, like before, hadn't applied to SC Johnson, and talking to him, I was like, I need to work with people that have this kind of mindset. And I was just so lucky that it worked out. Joined the team, and just an awesome group of people. And you look back at that time, and Alex, you get to still go to that office, but the fact that that office was such a community, and of course, through the last couple of years where there's so much time working from home and working separate, you really start to appreciate how great that was. Like the fact that it was in Brantford, so most people went to the cafeteria at lunch, and it's like, oh well, why are you going to the cafeteria? It's like, no, that is a major part of building that culture and building that community.
Yeah.
And like the Friday lunchtime hockey games, like ball hockey games in the gym, like that was, at the time you don't realize it, but looking back at it, that was such a fundamental portion of our development as a team and as a business, to have those opportunities. You meet people in different parts of the organization that you otherwise would not have met, and
Totally.
create relationships that way. So I think that was huge. I learned a ton at SCJ and worked with people that were so much smarter than me. And like, I feel bad looking back at what a shitty analyst I was, but here we are. made it through. They put up with me, the Nicole Carters and the Dean Knipfels of the world. I'm very lucky for them. But in that, getting to work on the Loblaw account, I still don't know if there is a retailer in Canada that understands their customer better than Loblaw. And that's through leveraging the data in their loyalty platform, but also really asking the questions that are necessary to learn who their customer is, so that their external advertising speaks to her so well. And yes, it is a her. And we, like, at the time, I'm sure maybe the color of the Subaru's changed that they know that she's driving, but they know her salary, they know the types of jobs that she works at, they know the exercise that she's doing, and what they're doing is they're speaking to her in a way that is going to help her get through her day and her weekend, her normalized whatever her routine is, so that everything just feels normal. But they also recognize that only maybe 5-10% of the people walking through the door of any one of their stores is her at most. So they need to make it so that experience is really positive for the 35-year-old male that's walking through, or the 80-year-old male, or the 15-year-old. It needs to be logical and needs to be easily understood. And their ability to separate that communication but make it feel cohesive is just phenomenal. And I look at it now, and if I didn't have that learning, I wouldn't be able to maybe make some of the decisions that I make now. I wouldn't know that I didn't have it, but I feel very fortunate for getting that building block. Like, that was such a massive part of my education.
100%. 100%. Having spent time on that business, I completely agree. Also, I'm not her, but I love shopping at Fortino's. So I'll throw that out there on the side.
I miss Fortino's. That's a good
Fortino's
one.
Is great.
It's a good one.
Fortino's is phenomenal. There's such nice shopping experience. But yeah, that was the initial plan, was to get in there. I also, when looking at that original career management and that original recruiting, I knew that I wanted to end up in that other bucket, like of the iBanking, consulting, marketing, and other. And I wanted to start my own business, but I had no clue what that business was going to be. Like, if you think that you need to have the proper resources, being the money, the experience, and a product or service that you really want to sell, I had none of those three. Like, it was just. So needed to learn from people that were smarter than me and understand how to learn, probably. Again, much easier to look back and recognize that was the case than it maybe was at the time. But that was why I went back to school afterwards. It was always part of the plan that I wanted to get some time, go back to school, take a bit of a reset on, okay, we got this couple of years working with phenomenal people, jump back into school, take totally different courses than I had taken before, go down the entrepreneurship stream, and try to get into consulting, because that way I could see a number of businesses and understand how they operate, and of course getting the opportunity to work on post M&A transactions and how they integrate and how they actually look at their organizations when merging. And that has become such a major part of this world. M&A is just it's if you're not transacting right now, you're really falling behind a lot of the competition in most cases, and that of course has become a big part of my life now. So that experience was needed. But going through at school, not just great because I met my wife there, that worked out. A couple kids, which you probably hear one of them crying upstairs.
How old, by the way? We should have asked that up front. How old?
2 or almost 2 and just turned 4.
2 and 4.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, that's exciting. I've got a 3-year-old, so I'm right in the middle.
Yeah,
right in the middle. And Alex, you've got
a 1-year-old, just a little guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
they grow up fast.
Fast,
and especially the second one wants to do everything that the first one does.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yes. No, it's awesome. And obviously that's the best thing that came out of school for me.
Yeah.
Looking back at it. But getting into the consulting, learning from, again, smarter people than me, customer focused, and gaining a different level of experience, but leveraging that retail CPG world, being in retail strategy. And let's call a spade a spade. I was not a very good consultant either, because again, it was decks, like do a deck, hand off the recommendation and move forward. And I really wanted to, again, be like hands on in the operation, and ultimately ended up at Tim Hortons on the US side, which they were a client on the other side, as you can imagine, with the M&A that they went through. So that was getting to learn how franchise businesses work, and getting to learn how each individual franchisee is looking at their particular market and how they're dealing with their employees and how they're dealing with the day-to-day operations, and then layering that up into a multinational organization strategy and then pulling it back down. That was so cool. And I encourage anybody that is in retail, like, get into field ops, get the opportunity to see how these franchise organizations are working, because there's nobody that knows their customer better than those individual franchisees. And the ones that do know it, they're flourishing, or at least they've got the opportunity to flourish. And getting to work with them and seeing the different backgrounds and driving all over the Midwest for those stores was really, really cool. And as I was doing that, you end up with a lot of time in the car, and I started looking at, where do I want to start to make an impact if I'm investing anywhere. And that was where I really got to the fact that cannabis legalization, it was announced that it was going to be coming down the line. No idea when legalization was going to happen. And I felt with any industry, when it's coming online, and the easiest one to look at was alcohol, because it went from being prohibited to then being legalized, and that whole industry needed to mature, and there were huge changes that needed to happen there. And there were experts in each of the areas of each pillar of that business to create a full value chain for the end consumer. So it was looking at, okay, well, there are going to be brands, there are going to be some interesting things that come out of this, but more importantly, it's a product that I believe can have a positive impact on people's lives. If you look at the alternatives on, like, even just you start with the hemp side, paper versus hemp. If you get into petroleum, you get into any number of forms of cannabis versus pharmaceuticals. There's so many products that can come out of that. And then, of course, you get to the recreational side, the fun and games, which is where I operate, because I don't have an expertise in those other areas. I felt like I had something to give on the retail side, but more than anything, I was looking at the opportunity to invest in Tokyo Smoke. And in looking at that opportunity, they happened to need somebody to do retail ops. So got pretty fortunate. Actually, I was moving to Miami with my wife with RBI, and the movers were in my condo doing the assessment for, like, how many boxes they need and stuff. I was about to leave the condo to go pick up a truck that was from the dealership that I had just purchased to ship to Miami, Canadian dollar versus US dollar, and then was headed to my rehearsal dinner from there. And I got a call asking if I would stick around in Toronto and take on this retail ops job with Tokyo Smoke. I was like, listen, Brian, I'll call you back. And
was it winter or summer when you got this call? In the winter, I feel like that'd be
this is winter.
tough.
My wife has still not let me live that one down. That we could have been in Miami through the last few years. Yeah, they obviously didn't respond at that point. It was okay. I have a few things to think about right now, and ultimately I got back from the honeymoon and was like, you know what, let's do this. Let's take this on, and it just kind of threw a monkey wrench into all of those life plans. And I guess it was 13th or 14th office employee at that time. It was Haiku. So this was before it was in the Canopy. And I arrived on day one, and first of all, the door didn't work. The washroom didn't work. We were in this, like, shitty industrial building, like off of Dufferin. And I got it finally, because of course I arrived like I was still operating at Tim Hortons. So you arrive sometime in the 7s, and I learned that was not the case. So it sat on the front step for a little while. And when when someone arrived, we got into the office, and the total office size was 1,700 square feet.
Wow.
And that included the kitchen
Yeah.
and 2 offices and just like an open bullpen, and all an old industrial building. And there was a couple minutes of thinking like, wow, what did I get myself into? You're like, what is going on?
Yeah, you're checking the weather in Miami while you're sitting on the porch.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
What did I do? And this is the start of March 2018. We still don't know when legalization is going to happen.
Yeah.
But holy smokes, in those 1,700 square feet, there were just awesome people. Like, the things that I got to learn from each one of the individuals that were involved in that business, it was life changing. It was absolutely life changing, because there was such a passion for what we were building and creating. And I say I got to be there at the tail end of all these things. So don't want to take that away from the great folks that created that Tokyo Smoke brand in the early days. Like, they had created and learned and made a place for proper conversations, and creating those coffee shops, the original Tokyo Smoke coffee shops, so that there could be a discussion about cannabis that was not talking about electric lettuce and not coming off in some stereotypical way. It was, hey, this is a normal product. This is a product that can be a part of everyday life. And what I think they did an amazing job of pulling out was that I consume cannabis, but I am also a father. I'm a business owner. I have a mortgage.
Mhm.
I have a reasonable size SUV out front with 2 car seats in the back. I exercise every day. I do other things. I eat plant-based protein in the morning. Like, there are other things about me that define me as a human. I don't define myself as a stoner. I do participate in that, but that does not take away from the rest of my life. In fact, it helps as part of my entire life. It helps as the whole person that is me. And I think Tokyo Smoke created it, certainly in Canada, that created that vibe that you could be you, and cannabis can just be a part of your life, and you bring it in as you see fit. And that is the genius that is Alan and Lauren Gertner for creating that brand, and then like the phenomenal people that joined in afterwards, like Felicia Snyder and Josh Lyon and Brian Pulsinello and Jeff DeGrasse, like those original people. They created something that was pretty special to understand what those consumers were going for.
Yeah, it's almost like destigmatizing a whole category, right? Through retail experiential design, like changing the experience, humanizing and giving depth to a category that was Cheech and Chong prior to approaches like that.
And taking the opportunity to recognize that there are Cheech and Chongs out there, and that's great.
For sure.
But
they're your heavy users.
Also, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's your heavy user, but there's also a lot of people that just consume cannabis as part of their everyday lives, and they fit into a litany of different categories. And I'm sure you guys have seen a number of these decks out there. Like every company's got their 7 or 8 versions of the consumer, and at the end of the day, it's the same as CPG. We've got to look at this thing as CPG because it is a product that consumers are looking for, and we need to continue to ask them questions about what they want and what format they want it in, and recognize that there is a little bit of that Henry Ford syndrome of, like, if I ask people what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of product innovation that happens there. So it's the completely new products, and that new versus the taking what's there and iterating upon it. So that was that initial entrance into Tokyo Smoke. And over the next 6 months, things kind of flew very quickly because we were adding people weekly, if not multiple times per week. So in that time, we added another 110 people. Wow. And there was an announced transaction with WeedMD. Then a month later, an announcement that we were no longer doing the transaction with WeedMD and we were selling to Canopy. Then it was trying to integrate with Canopy while also building 3 stores in Winnipeg and trying to get e-com set up because we found out that it was going to be 10/17. And Ultimately, we made the decision, and I still applaud Brian for making this decision, that it was best that we continue down the path with our own operations, with the operations that we had been planning for months in those Tokyo Smoke stores, instead of trying to shoehorn what the Tweed stores were doing. And there's nothing against what the Tweed stores were doing. It's just, it would have been such a long time to rip out everything that we had planned and put in what they had planned. And the whole point was to make it so that 1017 we had stores open. We wanted to hit that legalization date. That was what everybody had been working for, some of them for years, many of us just for months, to get that done. So we ultimately we parallel pathed in Winnipeg. Both Tweed and Tokyo Smoke were going to be opening stores. Some of them were very close to each other, but they were completely different platforms.
Yeah.
What we were operating with, and getting those the lead up into getting those first stores open, there was a lot of learnings, and it's like the first couple stores are more secure than most RBC banks. Like, we didn't know what we were in for. There was a lot of security that went into these things. The vaults were quite heavily armed. You don't know what you're dealing with, and that first delivery arrives, and it was in the Exchange District in Winnipeg, and an 18-wheeler turned around the corner, and there's nowhere to park there. So it's just on a one-way street, and pulling out just the flats of cannabis. And CBC's coming down the road, and we didn't even know, like, it's the first time we're receiving cannabis. We don't know if we're doing something right or wrong. We're certainly trying to follow every single rule. Didn't help that the guy didn't have the key, and I had to for the trailer, so I had to get a metal grinder from one of the guys working there, and I had to cut the locks off the back of the truck.
Yeah, that doesn't look suspicious at all.
No, it made way more of a scene than I wanted it to make. Anyways, and then CBC's at one end of the building, and we're hand bombing full crates of cannabis across the street to go into the back door, and again, doing absolutely everything in line with what the regulations were. But it felt weird. It felt like it was because it was so new, it was so different. And like, what do you do with, I don't know, 150 grand worth of weed just arrived? Like, is this good? Is this bad? And you hope that you're doing it all right. And frankly, the first people coming around the corner at that first location when we opened at 10 a.m. on 10/17 was pretty special. Less special for me personally. It was more special for those that I knew had been in it for a number of years, and looking at their faces as this was happening, and then so that on our side, but then on the customer side, the folks coming through the door, and we had profiled of who was going to come on day one. I promise you, I worked the cash between the two stores. I was probably working the cash for total of 8 or 9 hours that day. Like, everything went wrong with POS terminals. Like, it's day one of a new industry and all new systems. Like, it's not going to go well. But I served everything from 19-year-olds that it was their birthday that day up to, I think it was an 87-year-old was the oldest person that I served. Wow. And everything in between, all backgrounds, all walks of life, and just so happy to be a part of that launch of an industry that some had been waiting decades to be able to purchase cannabis legally. And that was pretty special.
That's super cool.
I feel like I've been talking a lot. You guys jump in, tell me what you want to hear.
Well, I had a question about I'm liking the talking, so keep going. You're much more interesting than Alex and I. That's why we have you on the show as a guest. So that's the first thing. But the second thing,
that's just categorically untrue.
The second
people
thing,
tune in because they want to hear how you guys are interacting with them.
Maybe who knows? But talk to me a little bit about, like, because you touched on it, sort of like the stigma that existed and how exactly you broke that down. Like, how did you remove that stigma, the negatives? Because, like, I think the way you explained it was right. Like, just because I use cannabis products, I'm not a stoner. Just like because I like drinking beer, I'm not like an alcoholic or something, right? Like, that doesn't define me as a person. Like, yes, I drink alcohol, but no one would ever then say, oh, I'm not capable of X, Y, and Z, right? Like, it's just but for some reason, and I think it's just because it's new, cannabis did have that stigma, and it had to be completely removed, right? So that it became normalized. And I think for future generations, it will be normalized. But for other people that grew up with it being illegal, it needs to change that, right? So how did you and the company go about normalizing it?
Yeah, I think that's, to be very clear, we're still on that journey of normalization that
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're not to compare it to alcohol, but again, utilizing some parallel in a prohibition being lifted. It took somewhere between 12 and 18 years for any kind of normalization to hit in alcohol. And the reason why we say it, most people that are smarter than me would believe that, because that's how long it took for the true supply chain to be set up in a way that had gone through a number of cycles and a number of improvements to make it so that people could the consumers could purchase where they wanted to purchase, and the product iteration had happened a number of times so that when the day after prohibition was lifted, the number one product on the market was moonshine. Well, that product was moonshine because that was easy to make and it was very easy to ship. You want it as concentrated as possible, so it's who knows what proof. It's very, very high concentration of alcohol per unit of liquid. 15 years later, depending on where you were in the U.S., the number one product was either Budweiser or Coors Banquet. Mm-hmm. You're down to a 5% product because the customer had the opportunity to give feedback to the producers of what they're actually looking for. And now, because there was enough of a market out there, you didn't need to define the products that you were making by the supply chain that was available. So if you look at that in weed, again, not comparing beer to weed, just looking at the industries coming online for cannabis, it was even going into Denver and around Colorado in 2018. That was 5 years after legalization for them. But even still, if you wanted to get a beverage, like a beverage this size, the camera's not really picking it up, would have like 125 milliliters of THC in it.
Wow.
And the instruction would be pour a little in a cup and then add water and drink it that way. And but it's not resealable. It's like in a ready to drink can, but then like that.
Yeah.
But it was set up because a proper and mature supply chain couldn't be set up because of the banking laws and because of the way cash and cannabis are handled in the U.S. There's no way to actually create, or at that time, there hadn't been enough impetus for investment. There hadn't been enough capital available and enough demand available to really iterate that product into something that somebody actually wanted to consume. By the same token, my favorite cannabis beverages are 2 milligrams of THC, and yeah, they are ready to drink. And now you can get 6 of them at a time or 48 of them at a time, similar to beer. Again, not comparing beer to cannabis, but looking at the regulatory frameworks as they came online. So I think Justin, specifically to the question that you asked, we are, as an industry, we are working our way towards normalization, and we need to keep asking the customer what they are looking for. And that's something that we will keep doing, and we'll make mistakes and we'll get feedback on that. The mistakes are often louder in response than the wins. But after I'd left Canopy, there's some time in between 1017, obviously, and where we are today. But after I left Canopy and had done Cannabis Jacks up north and then sold that, and I really wanted to make a brand that was focused on that normalization and focused on routine purchase. And the thinking of when there's so many stores coming online in the same fashion to coffee, I really actually did a comparison to coffee because Tim Hortons, there's lots of Tim Hortons out there. There's lots of Starbucks out there, but there's also lots of independent cafes because those independent cafes know their neighborhood. There's a cafe at the end of my street that it is my favorite cafe. And there are a number of cafes there, but this one in particular is my favorite. And I like the coffee. I like the people there. I like the environment. And that is the one that I go to. But by the same token, I spend a lot of time on the road, and you can bet that I stop at Tim Hortons. And that both of those things can be true. I can like Tim Hortons and I can like the nice Americano from the cafe at the end of my street. So digging into that further, the word convenient is defined differently by all of us. And when we were looking at the Northern Helm design and then flow, if I define convenience as going into the store, being able to quickly speak to somebody, make my purchase decision, and then get out after paying with my credit card, that is convenient. And I, as the customer, am correct in thinking that is convenient. Alex, you might think that convenience is ordering online through our website and getting into the store, flashing your ID, and just getting out of there, not having to interact with anyone. That's fine. And Justin, your version of convenience might be You want to talk about what the latest products are on the market. You want the opportunity to talk to somebody for 3 minutes, and you'll be like, wow, that was a quick shop. That was very convenient. But it was part of your route home, in the same way that grocery stores are intentionally set up on the PM side of the road, so that it is part of your route home. Same way coffee shops should be intentionally set up on the AM side of the road, because they want you to grab that on the way to work. So we're from a store perspective, we're really focused on that normalization and using bright colors and making it so that anyone feels comfortable in there, but also bringing in products that are not just the highest THC items. They certainly have those available, and we want those to be there, and we want to have a great relationship with individuals that are looking for those, but also showing a range of products that allow people of all experience levels to come in and feel comfortable to make a decision or not make a decision, and that's great too. That one way or another, you want everybody to feel comfortable leaving.
Makes sense. I mean, it's a tricky thing, right? So it's I guess it's a lot of experimentation. Like, do you find yourself leaning? I'm assuming you've obviously had to establish your own. And I guess before I'll ask this question, we can back up. So I want to actually bring the listener up to speed on Northern Helm and J Supply Co. and what you're doing now, because we've talked canopy, but the analytics behind that for you, like how do you manage that in the business now, and you know, what systems do you employ to keep iterating and learning and taking insights on what's convenient for, you know, Justin versus Alex versus whoever to optimize?
Yeah, that's I think all of us are playing that game, and data is something that everybody is looking for in this industry. There wasn't a lot of data available. Of course, like Cattle did the initial, like Ransom Holly and Cattle did the initial study on the cannabis industry in early 2018. It was a relatively quick and dirty survey, and Headset bought that data, which is an analytics company in the cannabis space, and sold it to everyone. Everybody made their decisions for their stores and their products in 2018 cannabis off of the Nielsen data, which was sold, packaged as Headset data, which was actually Cattle data. It was just hilarious. So when we were starting Northern Helm, we did a cattle survey, and it was like, hey, what? And we asked 19 or 20 questions about what these individual consumers, the profiles that we thought were going to come through the door, what they were doing outside of cannabis. I don't think we even asked about cannabis. It was just, we wanted to know what other aspects of their life. We wanted to know how many times a week you're exercising. We wanted to know, like, if you were consuming alcohol, how often. A lot of people lie on that answer, by the way.
Yeah, I do to my doctor. Yeah.
That was like, it was just, okay, that we can't actually take that answer. There's no way that's accurate. And it was, let's understand these individuals better so that we can hopefully tailor our language and do a better job with that. So that was at the start. Then you create the business, and we were fortunate because I did the early retail ops was for Tokyo Smoke. Then did the franchise operation at Canopy for Tokyo Smoke and Tweed, and then following that was on doing the Cannabis Jacks ops. So there had been mistakes that had been made in the past, and we were trying not to repeat the same mistake over again. I think it in the span of 2.5, 3 years, I had the opportunity to make the mistakes that likely would have taken a lot longer if it had been in a different industry, because there's just so much growth going on. So you take all of that to create the platform, but then on a daily basis, we've got a POS in our stores that we've big fan of always rolling out Cova POS. We're connected to Headset data, and that's a key indicator for us. It's a key tool. You have to leverage the tools. The tools will not give you all the answers. You need to leverage those and analyze those in a meaningful way. And since day one in the space, have worked with, like, Jeff DeGrasse, who I mentioned earlier, he was founding partner at Tokyo Smoke, and who was a partner on the Northern Helm business. And then Emil this year, he and I were on the same team when I joined Tokyo Smoke. two polar opposite people. Like you've never met two more different people, but I love the guy. He's so good, and he's also tried every single thing available on the OCS, like for sure. But the analytics that he and his team are able to do on the stores and understanding how products are moving, what products are moving at the same time as others, like really getting into basket analysis, looking at we look at hours of the day, and this is on a weekly basis. We're looking at transactions by hour, the dollars in each of those transactions. We're looking at the weather because we're creating trends for how long, over a long period of time, how that weather impacts it. And it depends on the season when people are willing to go out in the rain versus not. But rain has a major impact on most locations, depending on what your parking situation is and depending on what stores are around. So that we spend a lot of time on that. And on a daily basis, we're of course looking at each of the stores and how the prior day was and what we need to line up for the day of. On a weekly basis, we're looking at that hourly breakdown, comparing to the week prior, comparing to the year prior, now that we have that data on all the stores. And then on a monthly basis, digging in like very, very deep on the product, the customers, and the promotions that we have in place. So there's a lot of time spent on that back end, and providing that forward to our licensees on the Northern Helm side of the business. All of the stores are licensed stores, so we have local owner operators in each of those stores, and we need to provide that value to them and continue to look at the business holistically and provide the feedback from a higher level. And I mean higher level in the sense that there's just more data available than the one individual store.
And then you can cross-pollinate insights, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we can pull from the J Supply Co side so that it's not just the Northern Helm stores. As soon as you've got more scale, you can look at it and see those trends a lot faster.
Love it. You just jogged a memory loose of when I worked at the Keg. And I remember, and I don't think they actually had particularly sophisticated systems to do this, but I remember they used to have a book actually where they recorded traffic and everything. And I remember my manager once telling me, he's like, actually, like 2 years ago on the second Tuesday of January after the new year, and it was snowing and we had X number of people come through the door. So it sounds like you're kind of getting to that type of granularity, but my guess is you're not using a binder. So
no, but the same idea, like the teams in the stores, the team, it's like by hour, it's notes coming in on what's happening. And because it's amazing when you start measuring these things and understanding. When you start measuring what seems like a very little thing, you start to see trends, and that the goal for any of the teams is to give them the tools to be more confident with the guests. If you walk into a store and you've got a really confident individual working there, and they're excited about the product that they want to talk to you about, and they're more than anything excited to learn what you are looking for and what your goals are, that is going to come across, and you're going to have a way better experience. Even if you're not purchasing anything right away, you're like, that person makes me want to come back and have that conversation. And the more analytics that go into the back end with very clear outputs for those teams, the better prepared they are to provide that positive experience to the guests coming in.
Love that. You know what? We skipped a step because I asked a question about analytics, and that was you. You're an entrepreneur, full blown now. You've left Canopy. You kind of talked about your venture up north that you've exited, but walk us through the move into entrepreneurship, and let's bring everyone listening up to speed on what exactly your current ventures are.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I've still got a long way to go before I can consider myself an entrepreneur. I listen to some of the people who have on here, like those guys are entrepreneurs. Like it is an impressive group. But thank you. It's been a wild ride the last few years. Very lucky. I think you look at it and there's so many things that have to go right for any venture to get going. And starting at home, I'm very lucky that fantastic wife that supports my craziness. So without that, I would not be able to do what I do. She has a very or more stable job than the things that I get into, being in industrial real estate, and is quite the opposite than me in a lot of ways, in very good ways. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to go after these crazy things, because if there wasn't that rock at home, it likely wouldn't go as smoothly. I like having a house. I like and knowing that there isn't any questions there. So that gives the confidence to go out and take on these. So yeah, had done a couple of years at Canopy, and it was January, February of 2020, and was leading the budget for Canopy Retail, which at that time had Tweed, Tokyo Smoke, and then the franchise business, and was doing the budgeting there for the next fiscal year. And was looking around, and that was effectively 2 years after I had joined Haiku originally, and it was no longer 13 office employees. There were 42 or 4,400 employees. Things had changed a lot, and
you guys had a little more space than the 1,700 square feet at this point.
There's still
yeah, it was still an old industrial building, but it was a cool old industrial building.
Yeah.
It was it really, really cool office, actually. But it was very different, and it was still like just awesome people. I was thankfully had been involved in hiring or bringing in a lot of people, specifically on the retail team, either directly recruiting them or it was part of the interview process. So it felt pretty special walking through that. And I think there was a level of comfort there. And there was also that level of confidence that I think I'm prepared to go out and do something crazy here. I think that it could take something on. And I ultimately resigned so that it was the end of June that year. And I didn't have a plan. There wasn't a plan, but I knew that I was going to, okay, well, it was maybe July 3rd and July 6th, I'm getting on the road. Like, let's pull something together. So drove up to Sault Ste. Marie, met with a former franchisee of mine, Tim Hortons franchisee of mine, who had applied for a license and had, as a friend, I provided some feedback along the way and some support along the way. Like, hey, I would talk to this person, and it supported to what extent was okay to support, and went up and met with him, and it's like, let's do something. Let's take this on. And within 2 weeks, had created a license agreement, had created the formal operating model that we were going to run the first Cannabis Jacks on, his name, his brand, and had sold multiple licenses for Cannabis Jack stores to operate. And this was there was 70 stores, 75 stores at this point. So like pretty early. And 6 weeks later, we got the first one open, and we were rolling into getting the next stores open in Sudbury, North Bay, and Timmins. Like, it was surreal how quickly it went. And it was so good and such a good learning. But then at the same time, I think it was so fast after leaving Canopy. And I didn't take that time to figure out, well, what do I actually want to create here? And there was a realization of you're just running for the sake of running without having a direction. And I hadn't taken a step back and done a vivid vision of what I wanted the next 3 years to look like. So next door neighbor's actually, he's an entrepreneur. He was a true entrepreneur. He was on the founding team at Indochino, and his feedback was, he handed me a book by Cameron Herold. Do this vivid vision. Like, nobody's going to be able to answer a question for you. It's read this book, and it's a very short book. There's just a lot of there's a lot of how-tos on creating a vivid vision, and really dive into doing this thing and commit to doing it, and take 7-8 hours where you are alone in a room and pull the ideas that you need together and do this thing and put it to paper. I was really lucky that one of my best friends was also doing it at the same time for his business, and at a totally different stage of his business. So we were able to have a little bit of back and forth on it. And the realization was that I did want to create that brand, and I wanted to create that normalized platform, something that could scale with the industry and could evolve with the industry and really get to that core of what we were talking about this whole time, and meet that consumer need. And ultimately within the next few weeks, sold my portion of the business to my then partner, so that I could go do that. And obviously, a lot of things have to fall nicely into place for these things to happen, but that is how it worked out. And I had registered Northern Helm back in 2016. I had grabbed the name for Northern Helm. Again, didn't know what business I was going to use it for. Wanted to use it something in cannabis. Wasn't sure how that would ever play out, but I still had the domain and loved the name. The idea, a bit of a homage to the North, but not something that couldn't be taken down to the US, which is good because we've started a US business now, so they can use that. And recognizing that the industry is moving all over and everything's changing and we're constantly having to adapt, and helm of a ship, you should hopefully go around the shoals and not run over them too hard. So that was the background of the name, and went through the branding process and went through the steps necessary to create the logos and create the website and the social. And of course, then you go through a couple months later and you change the website and the social because you decide that you don't like the layout and you don't like the colors used, and that's part of the iterative process here. And worked with a couple awesome folks that ended up being licensees in the Durham region, in Toronto, in Ottawa, Kingston, and it sold that platform. And we got within the next 6 months, we had it was a little bit longer than that, but 8 months had 6 of those stores operating, and nice. It was building it from scratch, but leveraging what had been used before. So it was, as with any of these things, there's a lot of building the plane while it's flying, but leveraging the fact that, okay, we know the systems that are going in place. We know how this all is meant to fit together, but yeah, the color is going to change behind the cache, and we're going to adjust the drawers because there's just too many things going on in the last store. So leveraging those pieces and working with phenomenal people, getting the right people around the table, getting the operational support, the product support, the new store opening support, having all of those good people in place. None of this works without having the right people there, and then having fantastic licensees to get going. But in that 6 or 8 months, there was a massive glut in the market of stores coming on. So it went from 120 stores to about 500 stores. And there was a real feeling in the market that if you don't have scale for at least having buying power over the systems that you have in place, and have a big enough platform so that you can get a call on the first ring from the licensed producers so that you have product and you can do these promotions, there's a fear that we weren't going to be able to do a good enough job serving our licensees without having a little bit more scale. So hence the merger with J Supply Co. So we merged that business. They had 2 corporate stores and a third one that we helped them open right after closing. And then they had 2 licensed stores, and it worked out pretty nicely because none of the stores competed. They were nowhere near each other, like Thunder Bay, Guelph, London, Windsor, versus we're mostly Eastern Ontario with the Northern Helm business. We did another little brand alignment to ensure that business was far more focused on the 25-year-old male. We were far more focused on the 35-year-old female in terms of the communication and the look and feel and how the social platforms look. So we were happy that we were able to create something that was meeting 2 different markets. One's more city, one's more in the suburbs, and it's worked out pretty nicely. Now, the thing with that industry growing so quickly, and by the end of 2021, with 12 or 1,300 stores open, by the end of 2022, close to 1,600 open operating. I think that number is wrong. I think more stores closed, but anyways, that's the official number at the end of the year. There wasn't a lot of sense in continuing to add stores that quickly. There was a lot more sense in refining the offering that was out there and doing a great job with the stores that were open. It was very much a mindset of let's take a step back and adapt and serve the guests that are coming through the door in the absolute best way possible so that we can continue doing this for a long time to come. And we've got a few more stores coming online. One's opening January 30th in King West with the great group that owns the Danforth location. They're opening another store, just the best operators. It's so good. And I don't mean that in a bad way to anybody else. They're great operators. I worked with one of the owners actually at Canopy. He was the 3rd director of retail operations down the line. So we first met when I brought him to Winnipeg on day 1. I was like, hey, come see some stores. It's going to be fun. I left Zara for this. Like, what is happening? No, Chris is great. So this year there's going to be a lot more consolidation. There's going to be a lot more adjusting to meet what the customer is looking for, because the customer is getting a lot smarter with what they're looking for in terms of the questions that they're able to ask, because the products at the end of it, I'm going to get this number slightly off, but it will be close enough to make the point. At the end of 2021, there were about 700 or 800 products available on the OCS. By the end of 2022, there was almost 2,000 available. By the end of 2023, there will be over 3,500 available. So if you look at the number of products that are out there in the market, and so these are products that are legally allowed to be sold in Ontario. So it first to go through the federal, then the provincial boards, and that no store without mountains of cash behind them can have that many products in stock. And also, how difficult is that for a consumer to shop? Because like imagine there were 150 different or 150 different light containers, and Ziploc's one of them.
Yeah,
it's a paradox. It's too much.
It's too much. It's not a good experience for those guests. So it's refining that into each of the stores, and that's where I think our team is so well prepared for this, because of the way we're looking at the products, and again, continuing to surround myself with people that are much smarter than me, so that we can hopefully make those decisions, or at least give recommendations that it will be close enough that we have the opportunity to learn. It's more of a slap on the wrist as opposed to like full blown failure on it. As the consumers keep going, that's going to change. There will be stores that close. There will be new stores that open. There will be a lot of consolidation. And I said this before in articles. You look at right now, the fast coffee, quick serve coffee is dominated in Canada by Tim Hortons and Starbucks. Well, if you look at the trajectory of Tim Hortons in the 70s, they were counted in the hundreds. Like it took them 17 years to get to 1,000 stores.
Yeah.
Like it was a long time. And if you look in year 3, it probably would have been like we go to coffee time. Like, what are you talking about, Tim Hortons? Yeah. Like that's not why you're a Tim Hortons guy. That's weird. I'm a coffee time guy, or I'm whatever coffee person that was out there. Country style. There you go. Yeah, that was the real wars out west, country style versus Tim's. But it took a long time, and it's easy to look back and be like, of course they were going to have 5,000 stores, and of course they were going to nail it on the branding and get Sidney Crosby in there, and like they were going to do that. But 50 years ago, I don't know that anybody was actually banking on that. Like right after Tim Horton himself tragically died, that the transition from Ron Joyce buying the rights from Tim's wife, he overpaid for what the value of that business was. Now, of course, there's all this issue, like 15 years later, they're suing, but it's like, at the time, there was not that much. We're talking 8 donut shops.
Yeah.
And he paid $1 million for half of it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
There wasn't a ton there. And there's a lot of effort and a lot of luck that it went into creating a chain like that. And I think we're starting to see that we're at the start of what that ball will start rolling in the cannabis space. That is my belief.
It's interesting. I guess that's the most important strategic objective of people who want to be in it for the long term, is be ready to weather that contraction, right? Like ultimately, if there's going to be 3,500 products at the end of 2023, whether that number keeps going up, it may keep going up, proliferating, but over time, consolidation is going to happen, right? Consumers are going to decide where they want to spend. And this is something we've asked. I think I asked on one of our first episodes, like, when it comes to, smoking as a subsegment of the business, like I would imagine that like pre-rolls, for example, must be seeing increasing growth, and different forms are taking off versus others. And like you said, high concentration, one-time open liquids from your Denver example obviously aren't going to be around for very long. So that kind of stuff's it's going to happen on the product side, but then to your point, it's also going to happen at the retail side. So
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's funny, even in the 4.5 years or just over 4 years since legalization, it is funny to see how much Canada has followed Colorado. So
Mhm.
a few of us went to Denver in like spring 2018 for the 5 year anniversary of legalization, and we're going around to all these different retailers and trying like, hey, what have you learned? Like, what iterations have you made? I spoke to this one individual. He had a couple stores. He had the only store in Vale at the time, so not a bad spot to have, and it had this tiny footprint. And I I was at the point where I don't know what to ask. It was like, so how are you winning here? Like, how is this going for you? And his comment was, the problem that a lot of people are having is they're still putting their worst product in the pre-rolls. So their worst product in the very easily purchased and then consumed
Mhm.
products. And he's like, but that's everybody's entrance into the world of my products. It's everybody's
Yeah.
introduction to my products. So I would much rather put the absolute best product that I have in those pre-rolls and make it so that you are so wowed by that that then maybe you want to come back and you try the rest of the flower.
Mhm.
And when this industry got going in 2018, there were 9 weeks, I think, from the time that the government put out the regulations on packaging to when the stores were open. So you think about how long it takes to plan packaging for any of the products that you guys are dealing with. That's a very short time period to create the packaging, pack it, ship it,
Yeah.
and then be selling it in stores. Like, and create it from nothing. Like there was no baseline to work off of here. And the same went for the products. So you can imagine those original pre-rolls were terrible because they were not packaged well, they were not stored properly after the fact, and you weren't getting the best product in those pre-rolls. And now, or 4 years later, the category that grew the most in 2022 was pre-rolls.
Yeah. I think it just removed my guess. And part of it's based in just like what happened with cigarettes, but part of it's just based in removal of friction. So it's like the speed from, product purchase to product benefit is probably shortest with that was my hypothesis. So I figure over time it's going to be an increasing part. Not that all the other parts aren't going to be a meaningful parts of the mix, but I just my hypothesis when I was talking to, I think it was Mark Lee,
That was a
a
great
while ago.
episode, the first one, right?
Yeah, that was our first foray into this podcast game. But yeah, that was my kind of theory at the time, and I guess it sounds like somewhat happening.
Well, and your hypothesis, I believe, is correct, and like Mark probably he knows that stuff better than I do, being on the product side. Uh, but something has changed since then that everybody was waiting on. Up until mid December of 22, beverages were capped at a total liquid content.
Mhm.
So those lowest concentrate beverages, the ones that you would be able to session, or like I would session having a number of them because they are low THC, and
Yeah,
they are a replacement for the wine that you could have a number of glasses and still be a functioning human being and like have a conversation and do everything. Like that's the whole idea of normalization, is that it hits a need state, and you hopefully can swap out ethanol if you want. Um, those lowest concentrate beverages, you could only buy 5 at a time
got it. So
because
because I
because
heard
it,
you
it was
say I do remember that, and I heard you say you can buy a 2.4, and I was like in my head I was like I didn't realize that. So
that was, I want to say, the December 21st or something. It was officially allowed, though on the feds 10 days prior had put out a listing saying that it was okay. Now they had changed the equivalency, so changing that equivalency meant that now into the spring you're going to see 6 packs, 12 packs, potentially 2.4s, and you can purchase up to 48 beverages. And in doing that, it's increasing the incentive for producers to create these lower volume or these lower concentrate beverages, which, again, if we do the parallel to alcohol, it's getting away from what is the easiest thing to ship in getting closer to what do the consumers actually want. And that
Makes
is not to
perfect
say
sense.
that there aren't consumers that want a 10 milligram beverage, and that's also not to say that there aren't some phenomenal 10 milligram beverages. But there are some times where you're only looking for a 2 or 2.5 gram, and you want, or 2 or 2.5 milligram milliliter beverage, and it's nice to have that option, and nice to be able
Totally.
to decrease the cost on it because of the way the tax it was set up. The excise stickers are the same on a 2 milliliter beverage as they were on a 10 milliliter. So, and then you think of the cost and then the selling price. If you're spending the same on the excise sticker as a producer, I'd much rather do the one that I'm going to make more money on, or have a higher margin on, dollars wise. So this change is going to allow for, I believe, more innovation, because it's going to lower the overall tax burden of those entrance products.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I mean, I think those products seem like there's more of a familiarization with consumers. Like they're more novel than pre-rolls might be in terms of just the use occasion and use experience. But to what I'd said about friction before, they solve that issue as well. And they have other benefits, refreshment, etc. And depending how people create them. I'm sure that we'll see all sorts of other creative things, electrolytes, other product plus benefits that we're going to see get in there. So I am interested.
Well, Canopy owns BioSteel.
I have seen that popping around. I don't know a ton about it, but I have seen that name popping around on LinkedIn.
Well, it's also like they got the sponsorship for all the bottles on the bench from Gatorade in the NHL.
Crazy.
Pretty big deal.
Okay, so Dave, one question we like to ask people. And it doesn't need to be, it can be within cannabis, but it can be kind of anything. We like to ask, what's a brand who either you love their product and you use it, or they just impress you with either their product or how they are going to market, executing. Shoot.
I love listening to the answers on this one. Like with the group of people that you've had on, there's been some really fun ones. I'm going to avoid being cliche and not go down the cannabis path on this one. It was tough thinking about this, knowing that this question was coming, because there are a number of brands that are doing a really good job of understanding what their consumers are looking for, but there aren't as many brands that are doing that season in and season out, and really adapting with the times and getting ahead of what those trends are going to be, and getting ahead of where we're going with kind of the public sentiment. And like, you think of what brand is emulating Lululemon circa 2001 and 2002, and like learning their consumer and adapting their product on a seasonal basis, and making sure that when they come to market, people are lined up and ready for it. And they put something into an advertisement, and that product is gone. There are fewer and fewer that are doing that. Lululemon's not the same company as it was back then, but like back then, you look at that team, and they were such a cohesive team in what they were building. The one that stands out for me in doing that, and has known what they stood for from day one, and this day one was 2011 or 2012, Tentry. Like, and they're
we both love that. We both love that brand, so that's a good answer. Yeah.
Oh,
I decided not to wear my Tentry hat, which for people who listen, they don't see us, but I often am wearing a Tentry hat when recording.
You need to get Derek on here.
100%.
No, what they understood, like Derek, Dave, and Kalen, when they got that business going, they understood this love your environment mentality before anybody else, and it wasn't a tree hugging mentality, to be very clear. They can say that I'm wrong there, but how I as a consumer understood it was love that environment that you're a part of, and respect that environment, and also respect yourself and respect those around you. Like that was such a great message that was packed into everything that they were communicating out, and the products that they were making. And you look at the product iteration that it keeps coming down the line, like every season, like their technical gear, which is recycled fabrics, it is in line with almost any technical gear out there. And I'm not an expert on this, but that is so good. And you think of what they've been able to do in 10 years, and then really have, as that ball has been rolling in the last couple of years, what the next few years looks like. And at the same time, planting like 50 million trees or 60 million trees along the way. Like it's for me, it's the ultimate in like doing something pretty phenomenal with a business at the same time as doing something phenomenal for the environment that they're in. They're just, I obviously have nothing but respect for those guys and what they've created. And yeah, Derek's just the fucking best. So
that is a great brand fan answer. I kind of think of Tentry as like Canada's under the radar Patagonia in progress. So
Patagonia took a long way to get to where Patagonia is today, but they kept that focus. They kept innovating. They kept asking the consumer what they were looking for, and understanding when they were wrong and how to adapt back. So that's a big fan of what Tentry and they've created thus far.
Yeah, they are like the message behind the brand is simple that everyone can get behind it. It's not like a hard stance. You'd be like, oh, I don't like that. And then to your point, like the gear is great. The clothes look awesome. Alex and I always wear their hats and stuff. So it's a pretty easy brand to get behind, and wishing them continued success, because I do love that brand. It's always nice when a guest comes up with a brand and you and I both love it and are immediately like, yes.
Yeah.
We didn't plan this before.
We didn't plan it. No,
but if they do want to come on the podcast, open door invite. If they've listened this far.
Yes, exactly. So Côté, last question we ask people is sort of the career insight soapbox. So your moment, if you had David Côté from 10 years ago, or somebody, starting their career in CPG, or just trying to figure out what to do after school, like what advice would you give to them?
It's funny on this one, because before I knew I was going to be on the podcast, somebody asked, I was fortunate to be speaking with somebody that was 22 years old. Like, hey, what things would you do? I was like, well, listen to this podcast, because these guys are actually asking questions about what the consumer is looking for. And then after the fact, I agreed to do the podcast with you guys, and I was like, wow, that was terrible advice to give somebody to come listen to a podcast that I'm going to go on. It's just like, just the most egregious, like self-pumping that can happen there. Unintentional, but here we are. But I legitimately mean that. And this one, and there's so many others where there aren't so many others. There are so many other great podcasts out there, but there aren't so many that are so focused on the consumer and what they're actually looking for, and not in a way of like, oh, how do we sell to them? It's like, no, how do we make it so that they have a better opportunity to make a decision of how something may or may not fit into their lives. And I think that is amazing. But the other side of this, and that why this podcast is really fun for me, and why like the All In podcast is really fun for me, is it's a network, and the two of you have created this ecosystem because of the network that you made 10 or 15 years ago, and are pulling it forward. And the All In podcast, I love that podcast, and they all disagree with each other, and I appreciate that. And I don't agree with any of them all the time. Like that's the beautiful thing about it. It's encouraging having those different thoughts, and recognizing the stance that you want to take on something, or recognizing that maybe you don't have a stance on something, and that's okay too. But none of that happens without building those relationships 10 years ago. And I think the thing that I wish I had have appreciated more at the time was the foundation that would be made in that first job at SC Johnson, or the foundation that would be made at university. And I look at it like some of my best friends, like they're still my best friends from university are still my best friends now. And like, tell Derek that he needs to come on your podcast. Like I met these guys when I knew nothing about what I wanted out of life, of course, with all the confidence in the world of thinking that we knew everything that we wanted out of life, but really not knowing. Now I'm certainly old enough to know that I know nothing, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do in life. Figure 10, 15 more years talking to smarter people, and maybe we'll have an idea. But it's listen to podcasts that make you think. Consume as many books as possible. about things that are outside of the work that you're doing, because that has been a huge thing for me. I at least 2 books a month, and I do audiobooks, but it's a way for me to get outside of work, and I love learning about other things, and it can be anything. Like the Seth Rogen book was hilarious last one. Like great things, but and then really appreciate those relationships and recognize that if you can come to the realization that if you believe you are the smartest person in the room, you haven't asked the right questions, because you can learn from everybody there.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah.
And I want to be clear, I'm not in any position to give any advice, so that's just hopefully.
Oh, I think that was all great advice. I mean, I think the biggest one was listen to podcasts, specifically this one that you started with.
Yeah, specifically
I love the other advice as well. I think that's perfect for anyone starting out their career, right? And, I mean, and that's helpful for me too. I agree with you. Like, really appreciate the relationships that you have, and sometimes we don't do a great job of that, right? And then, and I think a great example, right, is like I haven't reached out to you in a number of years, and then you posted on LinkedIn, and I was amazed by it and just like so thankful that you did that. And I was like, man, that David Côté, he's just an awesome dude, and I'd love to catch up with him. And so
yeah, and that David Côté guy also didn't reach out to you, and he was doing
but it's life is right. He's we both got married, we have kids. Life gets in the way a little bit, and so it's nice to reconnect with people. That's one of the things that I really love about this podcast, and so just appreciate you for coming on and even just sharing that. I completely agree with that sentiment, and hopefully we can get together in person sometime soon and grab a drink and chat.
Absolutely, we'd love to do that. Thank you guys for doing that.
I'm not too far away, Dave, so you let me know.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. We could send a picture to Justin and be like, yeah, sorry, missed out.
Yeah, 100%. I'm literally on an island out here by myself. So like, I'm pretty alone.
And here I am thinking that you're at least close to civilization on the island, but not even that.
Yeah, no, I'm just out here. Yeah, exactly.
No, that's good. Well, much respect to both of you. Really appreciate thinking that I could come on here. Hopefully, there's a few words that can be spliced in together. So this is great.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Dave. Really appreciate it, and just awesome seeing you and catching up.
Yeah, let's actually do that beer soon, guys.
Definitely.
Good, man.
Thanks.
See you, man.
Bye.
Man, it was so freaking great to see David, and like I'm disappointed in myself for not having chatted with him 100 times over the last 9 years. That guy is awesome. I have such fond memories of working with him at SEJ, golf tournaments, hanging out. We both love country music, so shooting the shit about that, and just an amazing guy. And hopefully see a lot more of him in the next 9 years. Alex, what do you think of the interview, and what was your sort of major takeaway?
Well, first off, yeah, just so good to see him. I cannot believe it's been 9 years since I chatted with him, but what a great chance to catch up. And honestly, if we didn't try and manage these podcasts to a digestible amount of time for our listeners, I probably could have just kept going there. So either way, for me, if I got to give a takeaway from talking to Dave, mine would be humility. And I don't know, for anyone who is listening, I think it comes through that David's a really humble guy. First of all, you guys can't see him, but he's a really good looking dude. He's smart. He's successful. He has everything going for him. And the number of times in that conversation, he didn't pump his own tires. He kept his head grounded and level and just talked about the value that the other people who he works with add. And I think that's such a great practice, such a great skill and characteristic in anyone. I think it makes him probably a significantly better listener and makes him significantly better at learning from the people he works with. So big credit to David on that. But yeah, that was my big takeaway. Justin, how about yourself?
Yeah, I completely agree, right? He said the phrase, learn from people smarter than me, or work with people smarter than me, or have smarter people than me around the table. He used that several times throughout, right? Just speaks to his humility, because he's, as everyone just heard, an incredibly intelligent guy who really knows what he's doing. I think all of that was great. I also liked at the very beginning the advice that he got, from his family member that was just like, if you can sell, you'll always have food on the table. Like, it's an interesting mindset, right? I think regardless of the career path that you're going to go down, right, whether it's like supply chain side or finance or marketing or whatever, having the ability to sell is really important in your everyday life. So anyone that has the opportunity to do a cross-functional in sales or get some experience in sales should take advantage of that, because I really think that goes a long way, in every career. So just great advice that he received that has served him quite well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. Well, if you have listened to this point in the cast, thank you so much. We really do appreciate you. If you haven't already, please give us a rating or review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Follow us on our various social media platforms. And we look forward to having you back next time for another great conversation with another awesome person. Thank you so much.